the snow days and all that stuff. But we're coming here, and we're talking about free speech. And so Professor Josh Blackman is here to talk to us about that, and take it away.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
It's a pleasure to be here. My first time at Seattle U, never been here before. Generally, when I talk about a topic, I can analyze it dispassionately as a professor, sort of separate myself from the issue. This is not one of those topics. Last March, I was invited to speak at the CUNY Law School in Queens, New York. The Federalist chapter, just like yours, wasn't very big. They didn't have many members, and people didn't like them very much. But they invited me to come on campus to talk about the importance of free speech on campus. And it's a topic I've given many times before in front of audiences big and small. I didn't really think much of it. Shortly before I arrived on campus, the president of the chapter emailed me. And he said, Josh, they're forming a protest. I said, what? He said, they're going to protest your event. I mean, what do you mean they're going to protest? They're going to have free speech. So actually, I didn't believe him. I thought the kids were just going to bluster and not do anything. So the day of the event, I arrive, and they tell me that there are several dozen people massing in the hallway to protest my lecture. Again, I didn't really believe them, but I got there, and indeed, they were there. Right before I went to the classroom, the school security officer came to talk to me. And he told me, you know, there are a few dozen people outside. Still want to do this? I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'll do it, it's fine. And then he asked me a question which I'd never really considered before. And the question was this, what is your exit plan? My what? Your exit plan. He wanted to know how I plan to leave the building in case something happened. I'm like, oh. And I said, well, I probably will take an Uber. He's like, okay, that's good, you're not taking the subway. And I thought, oh. And at that point, it hit me that my decision to come talk at this law school about a certain topic of speech could put me at risk of violence. Now, I'm not a martyr, I'm not trying to get any sympathy, but I hadn't considered that issue before, that law students could actually turn violent if they didn't like what I was saying. Okay. So I said, whatever, I'll take Uber, that's fine, I'll leave. The administrator then says, let me walk you to the classroom. I'm like, okay. I want to play a video clip, or several clips. I want to play the clip of me walking down the hallway. And this is a law school like any other in the country, like any of you. And they were shouting at me and jeering at me and using every bad name in the book at me, and that's signs and everything else. I just want to play this clip. It goes by pretty quick. It takes maybe 30 seconds. I want to just start this off. Okay?
Hey, man. You guys?
By the way, my favorite sign, your legal analysis is lazy and wrong. I agree. Shame on you. Shame on you. Okay. So that's just walking through the hallway. And you know, I don't actually have a problem with that. If you want to protest, I think a very good and effective way of protesting is outside the room. Because think about it. By protesting outside the room, you force me, the speaker, to engage with you, right? I can't avoid you. I can't get to the classroom unless I walk through this gauntlet. And I hear your speech. And this, I think, is an effective of using speech to counter speech. So I have no problem with that hallway situation. I'll tell you, it's a little intimidating, right? People yelling at you and shouting at you. But again, I'm a big boy, I'm a grown-up, and I think I can handle that sort of thing. Okay, so this is the classroom. This one guy with a backpack made a half-hearted effort to block my entry to the room. I don't think he really meant it, but he kind of like put his back in the way. He was standing right where I need to go. So I sort of just pushed him aside and got in. Yeah, just sort of shoved him aside. Now, there were dozens of people in the hallway, maybe 40 or 50. I never got a good count. Guess how many people were inside the room? About the same number in here right now, which I guess is indicative, right? So there's 5 or 6 people in the actual classroom who actually came to hear me talk, right? A couple guys in the back and one on the other side. All right. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. They protested me. You know, no big deal. Let me go into the classroom now and actually give my presentation. Okay, so I walk into the room. Okay, so I walk in the room. The room's empty. I'm like, okay, whatever. They're going to be sitting outside. They're screaming shame on you for an hour. I can deal with it. No big deal. But then they leveled up, as we would say. They took the protesting to a different level. And they decided to come into the classroom, which again, I don't necessarily have a problem with, right? They have the right to be in the class just like any other student in the school. So I'm up there. I'm up front. And so they come into the room. Now, you see they're standing in the back with signs. Actually, I don't have a problem with that. I think it's actually an effective means of protesting. If you guys stand in the back, hold up your signs, I'm okay with that. I think it's actually very effective. That makes me look you right in the eye as I'm speaking. I think it's an effective means of protest, right? Okay, but it gets a little dicey, right? They're coming in the back, holding their signs. So far, so good. Okay, but you see, they're not just staying in the back, they're coming towards the front. And what they actually do is they wrap around the entire of the room. All 4 corners are covered. And they come right behind me. Now, just watch it for a second. They're standing literally inches behind me. The same distance as this bench is to where I'm standing, they were behind me. I start having a problem when they're behind me, right? When they're in front of me, I can keep my eyes on them. I know what's going on. When someone's standing over your shoulder, it does create a reasonable apprehension of imminent bodily harm, if I may use the tort lingo, right? That there might be a reason why I'm like, okay, I can't see them. They're standing overhead with these big signs with, maybe they're going to do something. But even then, I didn't really have any objection, right? They're standing right behind me. I say, let's say cool. Okay. All right, I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Okay. Okay, so this has been going on for a couple minutes. I haven't actually said a word yet. So the guy over there with the beard, he's the president of the chapter, just like Tamara or anyone else, right? And he's trying to introduce me.
You still have an opportunity to lose it.
So thank you guys for coming. We're going to introduce Professor Josh Blackman.
So he's trying to introduce me just the same way Tamara did a couple minutes ago, right? They're trying to give a biography introduction, and people are shouting over him. Now, this I think is where I start having an issue, a big issue. It's a simple fact of human nature that only one person can talk at a time. Either I'm talking or you're talking. If we're talking over each other, you can't be heard. It's a crisscross, right?
The South Texas College of Law, he's here today to discuss the topic of
booing, hissing.
in the context of university. Professor Blackman has written numerous articles on numerous constitutional topics, and he's been giving this speech many times before.
And so the sign was conservative hate, it's not equal intellectual debate. Josh Blackman's not welcome here. And again, it's your legal analysis is lazy and wrong. I kind of agree with that one.
And so Professor Blackman
He's filming us. Just so everyone's aware, he's filming us.
Okay, so we're now about 4 minutes in. I haven't said a word, right? So finally, I'm going to try and say a couple words.
Thank you very much to CUNY for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, and they start talking over me. And, you're confronted with a choice at that moment, right? Do I yell back at them, say, you guys shut up? Do I call them little snowflakes, right? Or do I let them get their energy out? I chose the latter route. And I stood there for a while.
White men and those who support white supremacy.
I'm not white. I'm not white.
Then white men and those who support white supremacy.
Excuse me, I think it was already explained to you that you're not supposed to interrupt the speaker once he starts.
Okay, so again, I haven't said a word at this point. And if you can't really make it out, but the students in the front are shaming a student in the back. They basically said that I'm supporting white supremacy, okay? And there was an African-American student in the back, and he said, you know, I'm not white, and I'm here to hear what he has to say. And they basically said, why are you with him? Why aren't you with us? So it was actually a shaming of those who did not go along with the protesters. And I've only said thank you. I've not even said anything, right? I've said 5 words. At this point, one of the associate deans walks in, and she tries to lay down a little bit of the law.
Everybody stop. Let me tell you something. The university rules are people get to speak. You may protest. You may protest, but you may not keep anyone from speaking.
Okay, that raises a question though, right? She said you can protest, but you can't keep anyone from speaking. And that raises a fundamental question. What exactly is a protest, right? Does a protest mean making it uncomfortable for me to speak? Does it mean disrupting me by standing in the back of the room? Or does it actually mean shouting over me? And the school never actually has a good definition of what it means to protest. It's like, well, he can speak, we'll just speak over him. And I think at a minimum, the idea of the protest has to be different than a demonstration, right? If you're disrupting someone from speaking, that's a very different figure altogether than merely signaling your message in the back of the room or otherwise. I think the front of the room and the shouting over is not even protesting, that's an interruption, okay?
If you do, I have other things to do. I will be back. Or you can resolve this yourself. Or you can have me resolve it.
Why are you even bringing racism to your school? Can you answer that?
Why haven't you provided support for students who are affected by students here?
You hear.
Okay. So she threatened, says, if you guys don't stop, I'll be back. She never actually came back. She never talked to me again after. I never heard from her one word. But it raised, I think, a very tough question. What should a college do when you have a situation like this? Bring in the police, start arresting people, physically drag them from the front of the room? Okay. What do you do after the fact? Can you discipline them? Suspend them? Put a letter in their bar admission file, right? Tell them they can't engage in extracurriculars like mock trial or moot court or law review, right? What do you do during the event to stop this sort of thing? And what do you do after the event to punish it? I think these are very difficult questions. I can just say this with a high degree of certainty. If, let's just say, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was speaking and you had people, pro-life protesters standing over her shoulder, they'd be in jail, right? They would be arrested in 5 seconds. I guess I'm not Ruth Bader. Actually, more push-ups than I can. I'm not Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But at what point does the university say that there's risk to safety? Now, there's a third option. Instead of arresting the protesters or maybe punishing them, they just kick me out, right? Isn't it easier to get rid of me? And that would obviate the need to have any discipline. Because if I'm gone, they stop protesting. And this is the phenomenon known as the heckler's veto, which you may have studied in common law. It's a notion the person who heckles speech can actually veto the speech of someone else saying something unpopular. So I give credit to CUNY. Right? CUNY didn't force the chapter to uninvite me. I think they knew they would get in trouble if they did. So they didn't do that. And also they didn't say, Josh, you can't go on stage. And they didn't say, Josh, you need to leave the room now. I was actually worried they would force me out of the room. I wasn't going to go. They were going to have to drag me. I wasn't going to leave. I thought about it. So they maybe did the best possible option, which was not much. They explained, if you do this, there might be consequences, but of course there are no consequences. My perspective on this, I think the best idea is if you engage in this disruption, it's a bad idea to start arresting people in the middle. I think that's not a good idea. It chills speech way too much. But I think there should be repercussions after the fact. You know, there were recordings, the school was recording it. It's not hard to figure who these people were at the signs. They were pretty proud about it. They even put on social media pictures of them holding up these signs, right? There's no doubt who these people were, right? They publicized their attempt to disrupt my event. Okay, let's go forward a little bit.
Children, you can't talk yet.
So then what happens is you can't really see it, but there's a professor in the back who was with the protesters. He was basically there to protest me. Imagine protesters protesting another law professor, but this is the world we live in. I suspect the politics of CUNY are very similar to the politics around here. Indeed, their district, their representative in Congress in Queens is actually Ocasio-Cortez. That's her district with this law school, so that gives you a sense of where I am. So a professor in the back is saying, don't take his bait, right? Don't take his bait. They thought I was trolling them. They actually believe this. I didn't quite appreciate this so much later. They thought I went to their college to get a reaction at them, to try and Milo, right? Try and rile them up. And look, I'm not doing that. I was there just to talk about free speech. But the professor's saying, don't take their bait. Just listen to this for a minute. And the word they say, that he is threatening us, that, they were threatening me, they were over my shoulder. But the other that my words, my mere speech was engaging in an act of threat, that my mere presence there was threatening their existence. So now we're about 5 minutes in. I've only said like 2 words. And I said, okay, I sensed that their energy was pettering out. I sensed that they were getting a little bit more tired. So I said, okay, now's my shot. So I decided to interject. I decided to speak up a little bit. And what I decided to do was not give my prepared lecture, which I never actually gave. Instead, I wanted to engage them. They had passed around the law school this little pamphlet. It was basically a hit list, right, of all the things I've said in the past and why I was such a horrible human being. Now, they did a lot of research on me. They actually did homework. The stuff they said was completely out of context and very much not accurate, but they tried to actually take things I said and use it against me. Okay, I get that. That's fine, whatever. But I said, let me take this list of things they wrote about me and flip it on them. So for example, they had one thing I wrote where I wrote that the DACA policy, the deferred action policy for the Dreamers, I wrote that it was unconstitutional, it was illegal. I said I like the policy, I think the Dreamers should get protection by Congress, but it's not for the president to do it by himself. So my policy is I like DACA, I like the idea of protecting the Dreamers, but the president can't do it through executive action, he needs to do it through statute. Okay, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, courts have agreed with me, I don't know. But I wanted to challenge them in this idea that the mere fact they think a certain policy is illegal doesn't make me some sort of xenophobe or racist, right? So I try to engage them. Just listen for a bit.
For those of you who are actually here to hear me speak, I'll try. When I came to the sign, cameras, the presser's not welcome. And it says at the bottom, we reject the idea that his views, my views, merit space on this campus, and reject the myth of legal objectivity. Josh Blackman is not welcome at CUNY Law. Congratulations, you made me feel not welcome, but I'm still going to say what I'd like to say.
And that was the most words I'd gotten out in the entire time. And I sensed at this point that they were starting to recognize that I wasn't going to go crazy on them. I wasn't going to start yelling at them and cursing at them. So this is not what they wanted. They didn't want a person who's right of center. I'm actually a libertarian, I've been conservative, but they did not want a right of center person to articulate in this fashion. They wanted to be like a Fox News talking head. That's what they expected.
So I actually want to start by using the one legal argument you actually made. You said violence exists in the law, and it's a myth that law is inherently neutral. Okay? You said there's a myth of legal objectivity. So we're going to talk about legal objectivity for a few minutes, right? Someone did some excellent opposition research. I'm going to do this and actually applaud you. You found out 7 or 8 bullets on various videos I've given over the years. But I want to make a few points. For example, you wrote that I supported the president's decision to rescind DACA. Now let me tell you something. I actually supported the DREAM Act. This might surprise you. I actually think the DREAM Act is a good piece of legislation. And
okay, so you heard that, right? I'm trying to give them my perspective. They say gaslighting. You know what that is? Gaslighting is a term used to describe when a person's confusing you and trying to throw stuff at you to try and disorient you and make you think that it's something that's not actually there. They thought I was trying to confuse them, but I was giving my honest, objective opinion.
Remember? Oh, let me speak, please. And were a member of Congress, I would vote for the DREAM Act. My position is that the policy itself is not consistent with the rule of law, which teaches a lesson, right? The lesson is this: you can support something as a matter of policy, but then find that the law doesn't permit it. And then the answer is to change the law.
Ah, there it is. That was the minute I knew I had them, right? They had nothing left. They threw every racist name at me, homophobe, transphobe, xenophobe, ableist, every label they could at me, and it didn't do anything, didn't stick. And they tried to yell at me, talk over me, and then finally when I started talking about law, which is what law students usually do, one of their classmates yelled out, "Fuck the law." I was like, okay, now I got something, right? It's very hard for that sort of collective hive mind to be very productive because people go in different directions. And I was like, okay, let me work with this for a minute.
Fuck the law, right? That's a very good thing. You're a law school, right? And it's bizarre when you say fuck the law.
When you guys take the bar in a couple of years, do not write on your bar exam, "Fuck the law." I think if you do that, you'll have to take it again.
Well, if you like to speak, let me speak. So fuck the law, right? That's a good mantra, fuck the law.
At this point, I was having a little fun.
You do. And I'm actually very impressed. Let me say this. I'm actually impressed that there's so many of you. You can be anywhere right now, and you chose to come out here and exercise your constitutional rights. You want to exercise your rights, and I do the same. And I'm here the same. So I'm going to express my views. So let me go down this list you got.
Okay. And at this point, I sensed that, I didn't know what was going to happen. 2020 is hindsight, but I sensed whatever they were doing, they've peaked. They were going downhill at this point.
This little checklist, right? I think DACA.
Yes, sir. I don't want to listen to this. That was her response, right? She came there not to hear me speak, but to protest me. And when I told her something that she didn't want to hear, her response was to leave. And they leave.
Please leave, by all means. I think DACA is a good policy.
I think you're tired.
No, I'm feeling pretty good.
I think you're tired. That's it. That's what they have. I was feeling pretty good at that point.
Okay. Oh,
This is really about community law and how we let this happen. And shame on all your being, how do you let that happen?
I will support this.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
But it's now underlined by the fact that eventually the Constitution.
Okay, and now the room's empty, right? At that point, I decided I'm going to abandon my talk. And I said, let me take Q&A. I took questions for almost an hour on a wide range of topics, on everything you could think of, from abortion to criminal justice to slavery to segregation to police brutality to drugs to privacy. I mean, any question they wanted, I felt like I was an AMA, right? Just whatever question you want, just ask me anything, and I was willing to answer it. And I felt like an ambassador to a foreign country. Like I was just coming from like the Republic of Constitutionalia, and like I was just presenting things they've just never heard before, because these professors will never teach them the sort of things which I discuss in my own classes. And I actually felt like we made some progress with the students who stuck around. And I'll give you a couple anecdotes. There was one guy who held up a sign the entire time, very quietly in the back, and he said, the sign said, Josh Blackman is an oppressor. Okay, I'm an oppressor. And then he asked me maybe, 5 or 6 or 7 questions. He asked me a bunch of questions on a wide range of topics, and I answered them all as honestly as I could. And I gave the guy my card after the event. And, I didn't expect him to ever reach out to me, whatever. I hand out lots of business cards. And then later that evening, I got an email from him. And he said he framed it in such a lawyerly manner. He said, let me paraphrase. He said, I no longer have enough evidence to conclude that you are an oppressor. I no longer have enough evidence to conclude that you are an oppressor. Basically, I'm sorry, right? And I appreciate it. Thank you very much. When you actually heard what I had to say, imagine that. It changed your impression about me. Imagine that. A couple other anecdotes. The room looks pretty damn empty here, but I want to fast forward towards the end. It's like, whoa, where do those people come from? The room filled in. There are a lot of students who wanted to attend, but didn't because they were intimidated. They thought that their classmates would shame them. And many of the students came up to me afterwards, and they said, we are afraid to speak up in class with our own conservative views, not because of the professors, right? Retaliation is part of blind grading. But they were afraid of their classmates shaming them. And I don't blame them. Their classmates basically surrounded me. By the way, this is the guy in the back. This is Andrew. He was the guy with the oppressor sign. He was very, very respectful. Very nice guy. I liked him. But the students were afraid to come watch me. And then they all came at the end once the protesters fled. So where does all this lead, right? Well, after this happened, I left. I didn't need an exit strategy. I kind of left the building. No one cared. I never once heard from the college. I never once apologized. As far as I know, there was no discipline that was ever imposed. This hasn't happened again. In fact, some people thought there might be a protest at this school in library history, but I guess I'm not that important. There are better things to do today, I suppose. So I kind of feel like left out. They couldn't even protest me. My God, Seattle, where are your social justice bona fides? I mean, come on. I digress. So where does this leave us, right? I think we have to look at this from a couple of perspectives. So first, what's the role of the university itself? If a student group invites a speaker to campus, I think that the university has a very strong policy to ensure the speaker's heard. I think it's very problematic when speakers are unwilling to, when colleges force a speaker to be uninvited. That's a huge problem. Once the invitation's made, I don't think it should be revoked. That, I think, is a very basic principle. The second question is, what's the responsibility of the university once the speaker arrives on campus? This is where it gets trickier, because the university's duty to have me speak runs headlong into the right of the students to protest. And I don't think you can have one or the other, right? I could say, you know what, arrest them all, right? Put handcuffs on all of those people with the signs. No, I think that'd be insane. I don't think that's a good idea, right? They have just as much right to object to my speech as I have a right to give it. But the basic tenet is in the lecture, right? I'm up here, you're back there. I'm speaking, you wait till Q&A. That, I think, is a norm, an understanding that needs to be enforced. And I think the school should not allow people to stand right over my shoulder. I think the school should say, if you stand over a shoulder and you speak over them, you'll have discipline. I don't think they should be arresting people on the spot. I think it'd be a mistake to try and drag people off the stage. I think that would lead to more problems than it's worth. But they should know that if they do this, there'll be consequences. Let them get their stuff out. You want to make a scene, good, you pay the price later. That doesn't mean expulsion from law school. It can mean something like maybe depriving you of an extracurricular. You have to give up mock trial or move court to law review. Something substantive. And the reason why I think a significant penalty is warranted is to ensure people get that free speech is worth it, right? It's to ensure that when someone comes on campus, they're able to speak. Because I wasn't there to hear myself talk. I know what I think, right? I can look in the mirror. I don't need to travel to Queens to express myself. The purpose of my visit there was to speak to those people, right? The people in the back of the classroom who want to hear me speak. Because the speaker is there to speak and the student's there to listen. It's to give them an idea they may not otherwise hear. Now, all my lectures are on YouTube, right? If you want to hear what I say, you can watch this exact same talk a dozen times on YouTube. But it's the interaction, right? You do not get to interact with a YouTube star. I don't care what the comments are, you don't get to interact with him or her. By being on campus, I was able to engage with students who may have never otherwise heard about originalism, who may not even known that there's a reason why the text and history of the Constitution matters. I got through them. I made an impact. I know I did. And that's why schools should take this seriously. It's not for my sake. Who cares about me? I don't really matter. What matters is their own students and their ability to learn stuff that professors may not otherwise teach. Which is why I think in limited circumstances, discipline may be warranted. Those who interrupted me and stood on my shoulders, if they were not adequately warned, it may be tough, but if they were given warnings and they ignored the warnings, that's a different story. I think they should at least get one warning and then move on from there. So where's this go leading forward? Now, students always ask me, you know, Josh, what should I do on campus? Well, one thing you can do is become active in your student organizations. The Federal Society is a great group. They pay for my travel. They paid for me to come to Seattle in this lovely weather. I got snowed out last time. This time it's almost going to snow again. And they bring speakers. And in the ideal world, you'd have a member of the Seattle faculty who'd be willing to stand right next to me and maybe debate me and maybe engage me. As you can see, I'm up here by myself. And not for lack of trying. I know Tom and Tamara, they busted their butts. They try to hustle a professor to participate, but they usually don't want to. So you have to get a little creative sometimes, figure out, you know, outside speakers, adjuncts, or different ways of bringing other people in. But it's important to keep this club alive, especially in a lovely progressive city like Seattle, where you might otherwise think that you're all alone and no one agrees with you. There are more people than you think. For sure, it's a minority. But you don't need to just hush and whisper in the closets, as it were. Okay? And as for me, I've not been protested since then. It hasn't happened anywhere else. I don't know if it'll ever happen to me again. But I do feel very strongly about this topic. So strongly that I'm willing to go back to CUNY. I'd go back there in a heartbeat. Let them protest me again. I don't care. So long as they don't violently hurt me. Okay. I've talked enough. I'll stop there. Questions from you guys? Questions? Yeah, Tamara?
Well, first, I would say thank you so much for being here, and thank you for speaking on this topic. And I also appreciate that you gave us some pointers about what schools should do, because you're right, as part of this organization, a really big issue for us is to find out what can we do about free speech in campus. And you're right, we're just trying to get professors to engage and to be part of it, because really, we want to have a balance. We want students to have both sides, regardless of where you stand. It's about debating, discussing, and deciding. And so, in this context of free speech, I don't think that you actually really told us what your views on free speech.
Oh my goodness, I didn't, did I? Well, so let me break down to 3 points, right? There are 3 buckets of people I think are relevant, right? So first is my right to speak, right? I have my own free speech rights, but I can't just wander onto any college campus and just start speaking. I guess I can, but I can't just like storm into a classroom and say, I'm giving a speech, right? No one will listen to me. So there's the right of the speaker. There's also the right of the group that invited me, which in this case is the Federalist Society chapter, right? They reached out to me, they invited me and said, well, Josh, we want you to come here to talk on a given topic. So there's my free speech rights and the rights of the students who are organizing me. But then there are rights of all the other students in the school. They have rights as well, right? Some of them want to hear me and listen to me. I think the right to speak includes the right to be heard, because if I'm speaking to no one can hear me, it doesn't go very far. And they have the rights of the students who don't want to hear me. And I think they have the right to object and protest and stand outside the hallway and hold up signs and wave and scream at me. I think that's well within their rights. I draw the line at disruption. And the hard question is finding what constitutes a disruption. I don't think there's an easy answer. In this case, I was disrupted for maybe 7 or 8 minutes. I have an hour talk. Was I disrupted? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's actually a hard question. Objectively, I think it's a hard question. What if after 8 minutes of protest I said, you know what, screw this, I'm not dealing with this crap, I'm going to leave, right? In hindsight, I know that they left after 8 minutes, but at the time, I didn't know. What if they stood there for an hour screaming at me? Or what if I said, you know what, there's no way I'm walking down the hallway, someone might beat me up. Or the second they came up behind me, I said, you know what, this is not going to work, I'm going to be assaulted, I'm going to leave the room, right? What if my own, to use a phrase, the egg skull shell from Torch, remember that? What if I was the delicate plaintiff, right? And I said, ooh, this is scary, and I pieced out. Then they would have interrupted my speech, they would have disrupted it for sure. But I sort of stuck it out, and I didn't flee. I stuck around. So my own perseverance, I think, weakens the case that they disrupted my speech. And so in many regards, the line of disruption, I think, turns in part on the individual characteristics of the speaker. And if I was a little bit more delicate, to use no other word, I think I would have had a much stronger case they disrupted my speech. Or what if I came in there and started yelling things? You guys are a bunch of snowflakes, F this, F that. They would not have left. They would have loved that. They wanted a fight. They were ready to stand there for an hour to shut me down. So my decision to sort of just tactfully let them get their energy out and be very delicate with them, very gentle, made them leave because they said, we don't want to deal with this, we don't want to leave. So your question, I'm not dodging it, but the question of free speech on campus, I think, depends on the rights of the speaker, the rights of the group that invites, and also the rest of the student body. And I think you have to deal with all three of them. And I think all three of those can exist so long as there's no disruption. That's the point where we have the problem. If they want to uninvite someone, that's a problem. If they want to shut the speech down, that's a problem. If they want to remove the speaker from the room, that's a problem. But anything short of that, I think, is probably within bounds of permissible. And this is not a state college, right? This is a private institution where I don't think you're bound by the Constitution. Does state law bind this college by the Constitution? I don't know. I'm sorry?
I think that private schools have a little bit more leeway.
California, for example, says that private colleges must abide by the First Amendment. That's somewhat unique. I don't know if Washington has a similar regime. But yeah, I mean, there's no First Amendment here. If Seattle U wanted to kick me off campus, I can't sue them for violating my civil rights. I can't do that. CUNY, on the other hand, was a public college, so I could have, but I decided not to. I don't think I would have had a case. I thought about it. Okay, other questions? Yes, sir.
I know that your talk is mostly centered on correct me if I'm sidetracked. But when you mention things like YouTube and there are other places like Facebook that have a tendency to restrict certain perspectives, what's the best solution or where it might not be the government intruding on our rights so much as a private corporation?
Yeah, the question was about censorship on YouTube. And this is a question I'm getting increasingly more and more. I didn't used to get this question, but in the last couple of years I'm getting it more and more. So as a general matter, right, a private entity like Facebook or YouTube or Google or Twitter, they can't censor, right? In the word, the word censorship refers to the government. But I think we have to acknowledge that entities like YouTube and Google and Twitter have a huge amount of power over what we see and what we hear. Indeed, I think they have more power over what we see and hear than does the government, right? If Twitter decides to deactivate my account, I lose access to hundreds of thousands of people. If YouTube demonetizes my account, meaning I can't run ads, that puts me out of business. People are YouTubers that make money, right? If Google decides that I'm a hate speech provider and they bury my blog on page 15,000 of their search results, no one finds me. I've been disappeared. I don't think those concerns are trivial. I think those concerns are legitimate. And I wrote about this several years ago, that basically the tech companies can use their power to shut people down. Now, your question is, what's the response? One response, and that's something that is gaining currency on the right, which I didn't expect, is to basically regulate the ISPs. Is to treat them as common carriers, like the same way you treat the power company or the water company or the phone company. I think there are real problems with that because even though Facebook is powerful, they're still exercising speech rights, right? They're deciding what speech to put on the internet or not. So I ultimately boil down to, it's a problem when these intermediaries are shutting down conservatives, but government intervention will make this worse. And if you don't agree with me, just imagine what an Elizabeth Warren administration would do if they could regulate social media, right? That scares the crap out of me. It scares me profoundly because they'll regulate my blog just the same. And in other countries where they have greater protection for hate speech and otherwise, they do shut down social media sites. So I don't have a good solution. And I think unfortunately the sort of censorship we see in the mainstream media bleeds over into the social media. I think there's not much to do about it. And it's not a good answer to your question, but that's where I am. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What do you think is the disconnect? Do you think these students believe in free speech, or they have a off notion of what it is? What's the disconnect? What's missing?
They will absolutely support free speech. In fact, they were protesting, right? They were exercising their speech rights. But they will see that my words are not speech that warrants protection, that I am mongering in hate speech, and I'm trafficking in white supremacy and whatever.
Is that the concept of hate speech?
I do. I think they think that my speech is not worth protecting, that if they're there protesting or they're supporting, you know, Barack Obama or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or anyone else for Congress, that's good speech. But if I'm here talking about originalism, I'm supporting slavery and segregation, and that my speech is bad. So they are making explicit judgments based on the content of my speech, which they think takes out of the scope of the First Amendment. And they not only can shut it down, they feel they have an obligation to shut me down because my mere presence on the campus degrades marginalized students and makes their existence more difficult. So I should not be there. They were also mad with the college for even letting me on campus. That the college should not even let me there in the first place.
You see how that's contradictory, the whole concept of free speech.
Well,
It's normally just limited by, you know, should I fire a crowd theater? But now there's some other concept.
yeah. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So you're in a profession or in a position where you're in the minority, I would assume.
Yes.
And, how do you walk that line as far as doing what you want to do, but also being true to who you are and what you believe in as far as, you know, I'm looking at applying to law firms and things like that, and if I put the Federalist Society on my resume, you know, I just fear that will, you know, I'll have issues with that. How do you?
And you're a 1L?
1L.
Yeah. Thanks for so the question, if you couldn't hear it, was, you know, if you're a 1L and you want to apply to a law firm, do you put down you're a Federal Society member on your resume? Look, these are really good questions. And let me take it a step earlier, right? If you're have you taken con law yet? So you will take con law, I guess, next semester?
Yes.
Do you speak out in class?
Yes.
Okay. And are you willing to do that?
I just don't know how.
Well, so here's the thing, right? Here's the way I have to look at it. In law school, you are only in law school once. This is your only chance you'll ever have to voice your ideas and speak your mind. Once you go past the bar and go into practice, you're going to be doing drudgery all day long, okay? But let me just take your hypothetical, right? You're afraid saying, look, if I put down on my resume for fall recruiting that I'm a FedSoc member, I'm not going to get a job. That closeting doesn't end when you submit your resume. That closeting will pervade your entire career. Because let's say you get hired by, you know, K&L Gates, right, in one of these big Seattle law firms, Perkins Coie, right, one of these, you know, these big Seattle firms. Do you think you can come out of the closet when you get hired? Let me tell you something. I know this because I did a lawyers chapter event yesterday in Olympia. There are lawyers at these big firms, Perkins Coie, who basically say that they're the closet. Right, they're not allowed to voice their mind. They don't, God forbid, say they voted for Donald Trump. Right, they would never even consider expressing such a concept because they would ostracize them. They basically would be off the partner track in 5 seconds. So let me take your question and flip it. Would you really want to spend your career at a law firm where you'll be walking on pins and needles to avoid disclosing who you actually are? And this is not an easy question. I don't want you to answer it now. I think it's a very tough question. Right? Would you want to enter a profession where you can't be who you are, where you're forced to do pro bono work that you find immoral, right? Where you're basically having to like just smile and nod every 4th November, pretend it doesn't exist, right? Right, where if you walk into your office the day after election day and everyone's like in a morgue and you're celebrating, right? Not that so happened, right? It doesn't end at the resume. It's a lifelong pursuit. And look, there are ways of getting around it. You can work in other places but look, they don't make as much money, right? If you want to work at K&L Gates and Perkins Coie and these big law firms, they're all leftists, and they're not going to let you write an amicus brief for the Little Sisters of the Poor. They'll make you write an amicus brief for NARAL, right, and Planned Parenthood, and that's the world you're getting into. So it's more of a fundamental issue of how do you want to define your career, and do you want to be in a place where you're not going to be happy? And there are plenty of lawyers who just sort of sloth through and they just pretend everything's fine and they never speak up in work and they just keep their mouths shut. I think that'd be miserable. My God, I can't do that. I'm a tenure law professor. I actually, funny story, I got tenure the day before that event at CUNY. It was totally fortuitous, but my tenure vote was less than 24 hours before this event. It was just by fluke chance. But even before I was a tenured law professor, I always spoke my mind because I recognize that if I don't speak my mind, then no one else will. If there's one person in class who speaks up, others who agree with them say, oh, wow, I think the same thing. But if no one speaks up, then it's like, oh, wow, I guess everyone's on the same page because I'm an idiot. And that's valuable, which is why I see even a small federal side chapter is useful. It preserves the minority report, so to speak, right? The silent minority. It just, it exists. It's there. You can't ignore it. And it gives a home for others who may agree with it. So I'm not giving you resume advice. I'm sure a career service officer will tell you not to. I mean, I'll give you an anecdote. When I applied for clerkships, I applied to both Republican and Democratic judges. I had two different resumes. I had a resume that listed FedSoc stuff and a resume that didn't list it. I don't think I got a single call from a Democratic judge for an interview, maybe one. These are all federal judges, but you have to make a choice. And then maybe a smaller firm might be a better place because you have a little more autonomy. I mean, look, totally different topic, but I am litigating the 3D printed gun issue, right? Your lovely AG sought a nationwide injunction against me over the summer. Do you know how hard it was to find local counsel in the District of Seattle, in the District of Washington? Do you know how tough it was? There's basically one lawyer who would take our case. I just need someone to hit submit, to file my damn papers. And law firms, we sued the AG of New Jersey. Do you know how tough it was to find local counsel in New Jersey for a gun case? Basically impossible, because all law firms are just leftists. It's Stalinist. They will not won't let their associates take cases. I did amicus briefs in the Little Sisters of the Poor case, right? I have friends who did otherwise. They were not allowed to have local counsel. Firms will not touch this because it goes against contraception. I had another professor friend who wanted to do a brief in the DAPA case a couple of years ago. He couldn't get local counsel. Law firms are, as social justice-y as this college might be, law firms have similar policies. So you have to weigh that and decide where you want to make your career and if there's something that you can hobnob. And eventually you're going to let your guard down and maybe you might slip, oh yeah, I love that new judge is appointed to the Ninth Circuit. It's like, oh, you do? And then you added yourself and you're effed, right? You're toast. I can't keep a secret. My God, I'm not able to. Maybe you can. I'm not able to. All right. Yes, Tamara.
So my colleagues and I'm in the same boat. Like I tried so hard to be quiet my first time. But when I look at kind of what you went through and what some of the guests that we've had went through in my first semester when I was here, being processed and so forth, I wonder if people are scared to hear the other side because they're afraid to actually agree. As you said before, you couldn't find any more evidence that you were a professor. I wanted to know what was the evidence that you had in the first place that you were a professor.
Yeah.
And so then I look at Trump's new initiative to protect free speech on campuses, and I wonder, is that the right measure? Do we have to go that far in order to protect free speech? Because I really feel like if people really value free speech, it would be about listening to the opinions and just seeing where we actually disagree, where we don't, but we have to go so far as calling people racist or whatever, so that we don't hear it. I don't really think that people actually think you're racist or that you're
Oh, they believed it. They believed it.
saying it, but I don't think they actually believe
They
it.
believed it. Oh, well, Tamara, it's a good question. I mean, look, let me answer the question this way. I blame in large part the faculty, not just the common law faculty, but the faculty in general who don't put enough of a value in diversity of thought. Generally, law professors who are hired have one range of perspectives. There's left and far left, right? That's as far as it goes, right? The moderates, those who are just, run-of-the-mill liberals. If professors were up there with me, defending me, I think it would send a positive signal to the students that this is worth hearing. But not a single professor was on my side at that college. Not even the common law faculty. No one apologized after saying, Josh, I'm sorry this happened. So I think the problem is the professors, and forget executive order, whatever, I don't know what it's going to look like. But unless the faculty are willing to instill in their students the value of this, I think kids are a lost cause. I mean, this is a generation that, a majority of them think socialism is a good idea, right? When this generation grows up, I think we're in trouble. My days are numbered, I guess. I'm going to be in a camp somewhere, re-education camp. I don't think government intervention is the right answer. I think professors need to recognize this, but unfortunately, the sort of beatnik generation from the 60s and 70s, those who protested, they're aging out, and now the Generation X and the boomers, they're coming into the fore. And when these guys become law professors and judges, I think we're in trouble, right? These are 3Ls. They're taking the bar. In 10 years, they might be a judge, right? They may be a legislator. Right? They're the leaders of their community, and this is what they think is acceptable. I think we're in trouble, and I don't think any government intervention will end that. Anything else? Listen back.
One question for you. I understand that disruptions in any type of speech can be irritating and annoying. It generally defeats the purpose of having any kind of free dialogue. But do you think that even if, say, people standing in the back with just signs standing silently, would you consider that disruption?
No, I'm fine with that.
And
Well,
then do you also think that potentially that if you put too drastic disciplinary actions on students that do protest would then chill speech on the other side?
that's a risk. I'm worried about the chilling, which is why I think arresting people is a bad idea. I think if students are given a warning that if you interrupt and speak over someone and stand over their shoulder, there'll be a consequence, and they're on notice what the consequence is, I'm okay with some form of discipline. But I think it has to be limited in scope. But again, the protesting in the back quietly, I'm fine with that. I mean, whatever. It makes my life a little more difficult, but I should be able to deal with it. I'm a grown up. But the line I do have to draw is when I can't speak, when I'm trying to open my mouth and they're talking over me. So long as they're warned not to do that, I think discipline will be justified after the fact. And it doesn't have to be significant. It can be something minor, even just like, you have to do some volunteer work or something, right? There are different ways of punishing someone, but you have to make it known there'll be a punishment. Right, again, I don't think a letter to the bar is necessary. I mean, maybe there might be circumstances, but I think there's a lot of things short of actual character and fitness that can do it. Anything else? No? Well, thank you so much. I'm here if you have any other questions. Thank you. Thank you.